Welcome to the SIWIKE podcast, the only podcast that shares the stuff you didn't know you needed to know about jobs, careers, and life. The SIWIKE podcast, the stuff I wish I knew earlier.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the SIWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier podcast. We're here again with our guest mentor, Ellie, and we thought we'd do something a little bit different where we wanted to combine a few topics together and chunk them up into little kind of minisodes is what we're calling them. So we wanted to be under the broader topic of kind of the Odyssey. So for the folks that are aware, they've started adding some new life stages after kind of childhood, teenage years, and before you get to the adult stage, they've added this Odyssey type time stage where a lot of people are figuring things out. And we thought we'd get into three major topics. We'd get into learning how to self-advocate. We were going to get into dealing with adversity. And the last one is just adulting, right, in general. So we thought we'd kind of break it down into those three topics. So I'm excited to have Ellie here to chat about all three topics. So why don't we just get into learning how to self-advocate? So why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about what that even means and why is that important?
Thanks, Luki. So when we were putting together these topics, I was trying to think about what themes would make a lot of sense and really resonate with especially young people, folks who are, finding their way through the world. And one of the things that came to me was self-advocacy, which in a nutshell means standing up for yourself and acting in a way that aligns with your values. A really easy way to think about self-advocacy is, when you're younger and your mom makes all your appointments for you at the dentist.
Sure.
And then when you get older, you need to make your own appointments at the dentist.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not only that, like you need to start, acting in a way that your parents aren't going to help you, hold your hand through every step of life. And you need to do things that are hard, like saying no to people or asking people for things that is kind of uncomfortable to ask for. So self-advocacy is, acting on your own behalf with your best interest in mind. And we all need to learn and practice how to do that.
Yeah, I guess when you're growing up as a kid, standing up for yourself is more like standing up to bullies, right? That sort of thing in the playground when people are picking on you. But self-advocacy is something that throughout life, as you grow up, as you enter the working world, and as you become an adult, you need to learn to do things on your own. As you said, booking your own dentist appointments and things like that is definitely one thing where hopefully you're not calling mom and dad in order to do that all the time. But it also has a lot of application in the working world where things like asking for a raise, negotiating salary, and then to your point about saying no, right? It's understanding boundaries where if your boss is piling along a whole bunch of work and different activities, different tasks onto your plate, well, can you say no is a good question. So how was your experience in kind of self-advocacy? So what was kind of the experience that you had in maybe university and then transitioning into the working world? What were some of the things that really stood out to you as kind of, oh, I need to do this on my own?
Yeah, great question. In university, I would find that people often needed things from me. And I had my first forays into self-advocacy when I needed to start saying no to people. For example, if I worked out at the gym a lot and folks would ask me for free like training in the gym. Okay. And being a full-time university student, I don't have time to do that. And I certainly don't have time to do that for free. And so it was uncomfortable for me to advocate for myself and say, look, I totally support you and, your fitness endeavors, but I don't have time on my plate to take on, personal training for you. As I got older, it's also tricky because in your professional job, you get paid to work in a team and people rely on you, but you still need to advocate for yourself in order to do your best work that's aligned with your actual responsibilities in the job. So what I mean by that is that in a corporate culture, sometimes folks will, ask things of you that you just simply don't have time to take on. And that's okay. And so the whole point of self-advocacy is to reflect on what your goals are, what's most important to you, or most important to, the job that you're trying to do at hand, and acting in a way that aligns with that. So that could be saying to your colleague, I'm really sorry, I can't help you with that this week, but let me refer you to somebody who might have the answers that you're looking for. Things like that.
Yeah, and I find that working with your colleague is a little bit easier because they're kind of peers and they're kind of at the same level where you can kind of punt it off and maybe defer it to next week. What about when it's your boss and someone from at a more senior level is asking you to do something? Do you have any thoughts or techniques on what you've learned over the years to kind of put those boundaries and say that no without saying no?
Yeah, as a young person, it's very difficult. There's a lot of pressure, cultural workplace pressure to defer to people who have more experience or people who have a different title, like a manager. It might be scary to say no to a manager. And so, in terms of my tips, I would say have a strong understanding of your own goals. For example, I can't say no to somebody who's asking me to do stuff if I don't even know what's on my plate. If I know that I have a project, for example, that's highest priority and I need to spend, my focus time to work on that, that gives me a legitimate excuse to say, I'm really sorry, but I need to focus on XYZ priority. I can't help you with your task right now. So self-advocacy starts with understanding your own goals and what's most important to you in order to give other people a response, either yes, I can help you, or no, I can't. And also about learning how to not just say flat out no, but give them an alternative, either referring them to somebody, referring them to a resource, or potentially scheduling something with them at a later point in time when you're less busy.
Yeah, for sure. That was a lesson that I had to learn early on. And one of the techniques that someone had taught me was similar to what you mentioned, where, well, if you know exactly what work that you have to do, and your boss comes in and says, okay, I need you to drop all things and work on this project. Well, that's one thing. But the other part is when you know what you have to do, you can basically say, okay, I have these 4 other things that I need to do. Are you okay if I do them later, right? And if it's from another partner, another manager, another whatever, then you can have the same discussion. Would you be able to talk to this manager, this person, and let them know that your task is taking priority and their work will be delivered later, right? And then once in a while, we have the situation where, well, they all need to get done at the same time, and they're all asking you to kind of buckle down and work a little bit of overtime and extra hours. And sometimes that happens, but if that's a chronic thing, then you just want to watch out in terms of the work environment, because that's not a place where you can necessarily be sustainably working that much, and you might be victim to burnout later on. So just be aware of those things. But I think that's definitely important.
So
what about
not just about checking in with other people, but checking in with yourself is what you're saying.
Yeah, for yourself, and to your point about knowing what's out there, and then really giving them an offer to say, okay, I have all these things to do. It all needs to get done, and you have different kind of managers and people controlling kind of your workload. Well, you can ask them and reach out and fight amongst themselves, so to speak, in terms of who gets you as a resource in order to do the work. One of the things that I found challenging, kind of moving up the ranks, was voicing my opinion, right? So you're kind of the low person on the totem pole, so to speak, the newbie that's joining, and a whole bunch of senior, more expert opinions are in the room. How do you voice your opinion, voice your thoughts, and your insights into a meeting when there's a whole bunch of smarter people, more experienced, more senior people than you?
That's scary, isn't it? It's terrifying. The fear of being judged. You can start small. If it freaks you out way too much to ask a question in a room of 30 people, can you start to bring up your opinions in a group of 3? Try to start small and build it up from there. It's like a muscle. You have to flex it in practice.
Yeah, I found a couple of techniques that helped is one, when you start a meeting, always have the intent to say something in the meeting, right? And sometimes it's just picking out what someone said and just echoing it and phrasing it again. So, I just want to confirm that you meant blah, 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 blah. just restating that. So it kind of gets you into that muscle of speaking out to begin with. And then when you have to actually put in an opinion or a different perspective, the way that I encourage folks to think about it is from the perspective of curiosity, right? So instead of just saying that's outright no and that's wrong, right? Well, could you clarify a little bit more about this? Because my understanding is something else and different. And when you approach it from a perspective of curiosity, it often goes a little bit better because sometimes they have different information. Sometimes they have more information. And with that information, you might actually make the same decision as they did. But because you're limited to whatever you have, then you have a different opinion. So those are a couple of things which I found helpful in order to kind of voice your opinions in a more senior room.
Yeah, and I'll just add one quick point to that, which is the juniors in a company often have more experience doing certain things, like, for example, a certain type of technical thing. And that's very valuable to seniors. So as a junior, you can use that experience. For example, like in my work, I've been able to use experiences that I've had working on other projects, bring it to the table for the current project and say to the manager, hey, this is how I did this for this other project. Do you think that could work today? And more often than not, they'll consider it and go, oh, hey, it's a good idea. I didn't know that you had that experience. And so offering to be helpful is always appreciated.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of useful tips from the professional sphere. I'd love to kind of get your insights in terms of that more personal one where you had that friend that was asking you to work out and can you do that for free? What are some of the kind of tips and tricks that you can have in order to help put them down on the lighter side so they don't feel bad in terms of you not taking on that additional work?
Yeah. A soft letdown is to reiterate what my own priorities are. So not saying that I'm not going to hang out with you because I don't like you. It's not about that. But it's just, I'm sorry I can't take this on because I only have so little time to do, my own things in the gym. And then redirecting them. So instead of saying, I can't help you and I won't help you, like good luck, then to say, hey, here's some resources for you that might be helpful. Here's a really helpful YouTube channel or something like that, or here's another person you should speak to. I know I'm speaking about an example about personal training, but the same could apply to something like tutoring or any other skill that you want, that somebody is like asking you for, some sort of coaching. The same applies for that.
Yeah, and I think that's one where you want to be accepted by your friend group for sure. One of the things that seems like a strange example to come to mind is sometimes in university, people want to copy your notes, copy your work, that sort of thing. How do you let them down in that regard? Or have you come up with any interesting strategies to help you in those areas?
You need to set a personal boundary that aligns with your own goals. For myself, if somebody were to ask to, copy all of my assignment, for example, then I would just say, sorry, that's not what I give out. I don't give away that information. And again, like you need to know where your own line in the sand is to be able to tell other people no. So it's nothing about, I don't like you, I won't help you. A softer response is always, sorry, I can't do that because that's not aligned with my priorities.
For sure.
And it takes practice. It really takes practice. It's awkward. It's hard, especially for younger folks. I recognize that so much. But it will help so much in your personal life if you start to flex this muscle when you're earlier on in your professional life.
Yeah, and one additional note on that is to make it about them as well, right? To say, you know what, if you do this, then you're not going to be learning and you're not going to be getting the education, and then you're going to have to keep doing this for the rest of your career. And then when you get out into the workforce, what do you think is going to happen? So if you kind of play that out and help them to understand that it's for their own good for them to be doing the assignment, then it often helps. But as you said, it's not necessarily an easy discussion, but sometimes the discussion that needs to be had. So I think that's a lot of useful information about self-advocacy, and hopefully folks are able to take some of these tips and tricks and apply it to their own. I wanted to move into the subject of dealing with adversity, right? So if you can tell us a little bit about your experience in dealing with adversity. I'm sure a lot of folks are doing that with COVID, but I'm sure throughout various stages of life, they'll also deal with adversity. So what are your thoughts and insights that you'd want to share with folks?
Great. Nice transition into Minisode episode number 2. Nice one on that. So I picked dealing with adversity as topic number 2 in our odyssey of minisodes because everybody's been dealing with some sort of adversity during the pandemic. Whether it's your personal relationships with other people, could be within your family or your friends or your romantic life. Everybody's had COVID-19 related challenges, and a lot of the folks who are entering the workforce or new in the workforce are having professional challenges. For myself, I can definitely say I've solidly experienced all three. 2 weeks ago, I got rejected from a job that I was kind of hoping to get. The position went to a more qualified candidate, which is it's fine. I had some time to reflect on that. Before that, COVID-19, until I got my double dose of vaccination, was really challenging, not being able to see my friends and to speak to them face to face. And even before that, interpersonal relationships that had to deal with, like I had a breakup or a relationship that I had with people in my family, like being stuck in the same house with them all the time due to COVID. So all that is to say that adversity is definitely a part of going through this odyssey when you're in this stage of learning to adult.
Yeah, and I think part of it is previous to that, a lot of these adversities were probably shielded a little bit by mom and dad, by school, by other circumstances. But as you get out into the working world, after you graduate and have to kind of venture forth on your own, then a lot of it is no longer shielded, and it was always there, but you never had to necessarily deal with all the ramifications and the impact, right? And now that you're more independent, have to do things more on your own, it comes out and kind of sits on the main stage more than normal. What are some of the tips and tricks that you would advise for folks in order to kind of deal with certain things? So maybe we'll take them from a reverse order. So those professional challenges, what are some of the things that would help in terms of dealing with rejection from a job or dealing with challenging work environments or work activities? What are some of the things that you might suggest for folks in order to deal with those sorts of adversities?
Yeah, thanks for that and setting the tone for the rest of the mini-sode in terms of order. Before I start talking about any of that, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that, while everybody does have adversities in their life, if at any point folks do feel like life is way too overwhelming and there are too many adversities, please reach out to somebody for help.
For sure.
Talk to a friend that you trust or a family member. You don't have to go through adversity alone. And there are so many resources to help folks to speak to professionals if they are really, really feeling down on their luck. That being said, like I said, adversity comes in many forms: professional, COVID, interpersonal. And so was your question about like what are some professional challenges that I faced, or did you want to hear a different angle?
Or more dealing with that adversity. So this is all about dealing with adversity. So one view is to just suck it up, right, and deal with it, right?
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily the best way. So are there more kind of strategies or tactics that will help people kind of overcome the various strategies, the various challenges as they get into them?
Yeah, I'd say that dealing with adversity is about knowing your strengths. Everybody has a different outlet for how they feel most relaxed, most happy, but you really need to know how you work in that sense, what really like ignites the fire inside of you in order to deal with adversity. For example, if you love to talk to your friends and you've noticed that you've kind of like become more into your shell because you're going through a hard time in your life, make it an effort to reach out to folks. Or, if you're going through some adversity in your life that's, you haven't gotten any fresh air in days, but you really value that daily walk, you need to think about that and think, okay, well, how can I go get that fresh air? Can I like open the window? Can I go onto the balcony? Even small steps are good. So it's about coping with the things that make you feel best, and only you can be the person to decide that. You need to know what suits you. And also reflecting on it. I think journaling is amazing. I think I've mentioned journaling in a past podcast episode. Writing out how you feel, why you feel that way, and what your plans are to try to move on from that. It's okay to sit in a feeling and say, I'm really upset right now, or I'm really sad, and write about it or meditate, anything like that. But then the important part of moving on is saying, okay, what am I going to do next? What's my next step?
For sure. From my perspective, dealing with adversity oftentimes is just a mind game, right? And really, if you can kind of shore up your mindset. So a couple of things that come to mind is the quote, "This too shall pass." Right. So oftentimes, especially for something like COVID, knowing that the human race is resilient, right? There's basically some sort of issue or pandemic or catastrophe that happens every kind of 6 to 12 years, right? So for those that were around 2008-9, then the financial meltdown happened in 2002-1. That was like 9/11 and the dot-com bubble, and then in the 90s or something, in the 80s or something, and every decade there was pretty much something. So that's just to say that beware of COVID 2029 or something that's going to happen in a couple of years, hopefully a little longer, but there will always be something, and it's cyclical. But keep in mind that this too shall pass, right? So we'll get over it, we'll recover, and it's kind of that expression, what doesn't kill you will make you stronger, and we'll all be stronger as a result. But the main part from a mindset perspective, I find it's actually a quote again. You know that I love quotes, but this one is from Hamlet, from Shakespeare, and they basically say, "For there is nothing good or bad, and thinking makes it so." Right. So if you think about what is happening, it is right. You got laid off from work. You got rejected in an offer. Right. Well, that's not good or bad. Right. So if you got rejected from an offer and you find out that your future boss was like a crazy person and was someone who would like be out to get you and had crazy work ethic, that sort of thing, and really wanted to micromanage you, then maybe you dodged a bullet in that. So it was something that you could actually be thankful for, because the role might have been amazing, but there was something remiss about the situation, right? So anything could be construed as good or bad, depending on how you decide to take it, right? So one of the questions for you, or not you, but whoever is kind of evaluating themselves is how is life or how is this incident helping you? How is it working for you? Is it happening for you versus happening to you, right? And if you take that perspective of it's happening for me for a particular reason, to help me grow stronger, to help me be more resilient so I can tackle even larger challenges and really achieve my full potential later on, well, that's probably a good reason for doing that. So those are a couple of things that I think are helpful in order to help deal with adversity. Are there any other kind of insights that you would share with other folks in dealing with adversity?
Yeah, I love how you mentioned that very last thing where you said, is the situation doing something to me or doing something for me?
Mm-hmm.
And it's difficult to get to that mindset sometimes, to try to see the good in a situation. And sometimes there is no good in a situation. Sometimes things are just really, really crappy. But at least if you can, reflect on it and journal about it, like I've said, you can at least see that you can at least glean some insights from it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give you an example. So when I found out a couple weeks ago that I didn't get this job that I had applied for and that I was looking forward to getting, I was pretty torn up about it. It made me, fairly sad. And I thought at first that I was just sad because I didn't get the job. But the more that I thought about it and kind of like sat with those feelings, I realized it wasn't just that I was sad I didn't get the job, but it was because I was feeling a little bit burnt out from my current job.
Mm.
And if I had just tried to like get over it and move on and be happy, I don't think I would have gotten to that stage of reflection.
Mm-hmm.
So the point that I'm making here is that if something happens to you and it's adverse, you don't necessarily get the most benefit out of just, kind of binging Netflix and not thinking about it. But if you can afford time to talk out those feelings with a friend or with a therapist, a counselor, really reflecting on what's happening, why you feel that way, I think it's incredibly valuable. So
Yeah,
not moving on too fast, essentially, just reflecting on those feelings.
for sure. And what I've come to understand is that emotions are basically information, right? So just like your thoughts or your mind giving you suggestions, emotions are almost like your body, right? Kind of that your gut feel or whatever, giving you a sense of what's important to you, right? Because you wouldn't care, you wouldn't be so sad or whatever if it didn't matter, right? So that it gives you a sense of what is important to you, and now it's a matter of what do you want to do with it. So I often use a model where when something happens, you usually do one of four things. You either react to it, right? So this is like the punch and screaming of the wall and yelling at the top of your lungs, like, this is not fair, I should have got it, whatever. Some people do that, but oftentimes people bottle up and they resist it, right? That's kind of like taking one of those kind of flotation devices on the swimming pool and then push it down, but eventually it pops back up, and usually with more force than the original resisting. The other part is ignore, right? Which is kind of what you said, binging on Netflix. I don't even want to deal with it. I'll just escape into my other reality. But then again, it usually goes back to one of the other two because you haven't dealt with it. And the last one, if you can really do it, is to accept, right? To do what you said, journal and say, okay, why did I feel this way? Or what else is happening around? And oh, actually, it's not related to this. It's related to something else. And if you can go through that series of inquiry, self-inquiry for yourself, then I think it will be very helpful to be able to be a little bit more resilient and deal with that adversity. And one thing that I encourage folks to do is, well, not necessarily seek out adversity, but to just be aware that oftentimes when you hit that adversity, that means you're growing. You're doing things that you wouldn't have otherwise done, and you're really getting to that point where you are reaching that potential that you want to be having. Because if all you're doing is day in and day out, you're being successful and doing exactly what you've done, and everything's working out according to plan, well, that probably means because you're well below your limit and haven't actually do it. So with success, it comes failure, right? And adversity oftentimes is that failure wrapped around in a different way. So if you can kind of think of that adversity, well, this means I'm growing and advancing and getting even better. Well, that's another amazing perspective to have as well.
Absolutely. To use a word to paraphrase what you've been saying is that this comes along with risk taking.
Mm-hmm.
And young professionals, folks who are, in university or college right now, entering the workforce or moving through some other stage of their odyssey, are bound to have to take risks.
Mm-hmm.
And those risks come with adversity. But I think the point that we're both coming back to is that adversity in itself is not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all going to have to deal with it. But what matters the most is how you're able to process that adversity.
Yeah, and it's being able to recover from it, and hopefully in a shorter amount of time each episode that it happens, so that it's not like years, months, weeks in the making. Well, some people, it might only be a few moments where the emotion will happen, right? But it's a matter of, oh, you know what? I don't actually have to think that, because this is what I learned from it. This is what I can take from it. This is what I can take from it in order to grow and become the best version of myself. So I think that's a lot of interesting and useful tips and tricks from a perspective of dealing with adversity. And if we were to move to the third episode or the minisode of adulting, so talking about becoming an adult, because folks have graduated, and generally speaking, when you're 18, you're considered an adult, right? At least in the eyes of the law, right? But there are different types where you're kind of that legal adult at 18, and then when you kind of move out of the house and you're more independent, you're a functional adult in the sense that you can kind of pay your taxes and have a driver's license, book your own dentist appointments and stuff like that. But then the kind of top level is the emotional adult, where you're able to deal with adversity and all of the other things that we talked about, and you're really that top of the adult chain, where you're not just functioning properly and going through the motions, you're actually able to help others in the process. So talk to us a little bit about kind of your adulting journey and some of the milestones that you went along the way.
Yeah. adulting is such a, I mean, I haven't mastered adulting yet by any stretch of the imagination.
I
But
don't know
just
if
a
I
note,
have.
yeah, exactly. Just a note to especially all the younger folks who are thinking that adulting is scary. Um, Truly and honestly, nobody has got it perfect, and everybody's still stumbling and fumbling their way through what we call adulthood. A lot of us are just pretending to be functional adults, but we're all still learning. And so all that is to say is that, my journey through what I've been calling adulting is I'd really reflect on what I've learned. I won't talk about so much what I've done because what you do or what you're able to accomplish depends on so many variables, mostly dealing with your parents and where you're born, where you grew up, what kind of family you grew up in. But the type of adulting that you have a little bit more control over is things like your self awareness,
Hmm.
understanding your own goals, understanding what motivates you, understanding what lights a fire inside your soul and what makes you passionate about your career, understanding what you want to learn. That to me is actually like becoming an adult, or one of the really important parts to me. So when I think about adulting, I think about being a teenager and starting to get my first job at the age of 15.
Hmm.
That was one of my early forays into adulting because I had responsibilities at my job.
Right.
So definitely encouraging all people, all young folks out there to start volunteering, get a job when you're younger. It will help you with adulting so much.
Hmm.
Then moving through university, adulting became things like having to plan my own schedules out, having to, apply for jobs, like co-op jobs, and having to think about planning my food more vigorously because I was studying at university for so many hours every day.
Right.
Adulting as I am now, I just turned 25. Adulting for me is thinking about how much money am I going to spend on stuff?
Hmm.
Because there's a difference between buying things that you want and buying things that you need.
Yeah.
And also, again, like acting in a way that's aligned with my personal values and seeking professional development opportunities that are aligned with what I truly want to do and not just chasing things for a salary or for a paycheck.
Yeah. I think what speaks to me about what you said is for those that are on the younger end is to kind of ease your way into it instead of kind of diving into the deep end, to use like a swimming analogy. But if you had to basically had your life taken care of you, where your parents are really doing everything for you, and then you graduate and suddenly you're on your own, you have to pay rent, you have to get a job, you have to cook, you have to do blah 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 blah, and you're suddenly thrown into the deep end of adulting. That's not a great thing to do, right? Versus, well, get a job or volunteer when you're a little bit younger, even in high school, even younger if you can manage, and then maybe start volunteering and help cooking, right? Something simple around the house and cleaning, and well, you probably won't be able to pay taxes and bills at that point in time, but maybe start saving, that sort of thing, a little kind of youth account, that sort of thing. They often have those, and kind of understanding what goes into growing up, and then that'll allow you to focus on some of the bigger picture stuff. So as you said, like your purpose and figuring out like, can I do something? Can I find a job? Can I find a career that fulfills me? Or is it just a hobby that I do on the side, or is there something else? And then you get into kind of growing up, and if you go the path of starting a family, how do you kind of share those values with your children, or your friends, or whoever around you as well? So a lot of different things there. What are some of the life lessons that you've learned along the way, and some of the learnings that you might want to take or share with folks to help ease them into the kind of adulting stages that come later on?
Yeah. Wow. Big question to ask a 25-year-old. When I was 17, I wish I knew that graduating high school and going into post-secondary education does not mean that I'm like picking my career.
Sure.
I wish so. I went into sciences. I studied biology at University of Toronto. because I just didn't really know what other career paths existed.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I was going to be like a researcher, a professor. I'm not, newsflash. And so I'd say the biggest lesson that I wish I learned earlier was to explore what really interested me at that
Mm-hmm.
age. And then furthermore, as I got older, to sit in the discomfort of not knowing.
Right.
I didn't really know what career I would end up in when I was going through undergrad. I didn't even know that like the job that I have exists. I truly did not. And so being able to sit with that discomfort, but moreover, understanding what lights the fire inside of you. If
Mm.
you love working with people, working in a team, like take mental note of that. If you're really good at like analytical problem solving, if you make spreadsheets for fun, like if you've been tracking the COVID data and like analyzing the data on your like by yourself for fun, like take note of that and actually pursue a career or a post-secondary education that has to do with that. So understanding yourself and reflecting on it is very, very, very helpful.
Yeah, and I think what speaks to me on that side is a lot of folks when they're younger and they've graduated, they want to find their passion and work through their passion and follow it and whatever. And I actually say that, well, I don't think people follow their passion so much as they create their passion. And what I mean by that is like you don't just wake up and have this thought exercise and, oh yeah, I'm suddenly passionate about data. I'm suddenly passionate about this. I'm suddenly passionate about whatever. Usually it's a bit of a build up to that where it starts off with a bit of curiosity. Oh, I'm wondering like what is this data? What can I get out of it? What can I do with it? And what sort of insights can I gather? And from that curiosity, you spend some time with it, right? You play around with the data, and then it becomes interesting, and that curiosity develops into an interest, and then an interest hopefully turns into an excitement, and then that excitement turns into a passion, right? So it's a bit of an evolution there where that might be over months, weeks, years, right? Or it could be overnight in a sense, but it does take some time where it's hard to be passionate about something that you just picked up yesterday, right? Although you can have that true excitement and interest in it. And then when you do it over a sustained amount of time, that often becomes kind of that passion. So I think that's a great insight for folks to kind of consider in order to become that adult, because oftentimes that's one thing where in all honesty, most adults don't even have, where they're working and they're operating in that kind of functional adult capacity where they're living, they're surviving, but they're not thriving as most people would want to be doing.
Yeah. To put what you said in a nutshell, would you agree that you're saying you don't have to have it figure it out all at once, all at the beginning?
Absolutely. So it's one of those things where in generations before, you needed to have some stuff figured out. And the thing is, you would make a bit of a commitment that you would work in that career path for the next 40 years or whatever. And people were okay with that, right? So in those days, your high school choice on what degree to go to and what career path to go down was semi-permanent. But or at least that was the norm, right? Nowadays, right, people are hopping careers all the time. So if I take myself as a case in point, I mean, I did computer science, and then I went into more the business side, and now I guess I'm in education, and I still have a good 2 or 3 decades left, depending on how long I continue working, right? And will I continue to do that, or maybe I'll pick up cooking and become a chef or whatever, or maybe go into pharmaceuticals or whatever, right? So I have no idea, and it's one where even nowadays with things like the gig economy, right? People are doing multiple things at the same time, so it's not even one thing after the other. It's just they have a whole bunch of different disciplines that they're undertaking from 9 to 5 in the morning, and then evenings they moonlight as something else, and they'll do that for the summer, and they do something different in the winter, right? So it's an amazing time to be living where there's so many more opportunities. And the interesting thing on that is what you'll end up doing in 5 years, 10 years. There's a lot of stats there where a lot of those jobs haven't even been invented yet, created yet. Yep. So you might not even know. So to be able to predict and even to commit yourself to doing that for the next 20, 40 years, seems a little bit short-sighted in that you're not taking a look at all the potential opportunities. So definitely take that. And one thing that I encourage students and youth to do is become lifelong learners, right? Just because you graduated doesn't mean you stop learning, right? To always pick up some new skills, and whether it's on the job, whether it's something on the side, just being interested in something and advancing yourself, I think would be a very useful thing to incorporate into your daily routine, weekly routine, or whatever, because that will help kind of future-proof yourself for any careers upcoming, and just have a better life in general.
Yeah, I'd love to reflect on what you were speaking about just before you ended off on the last topic, where you were talking about different jobs and how different jobs will and will not exist in the future, and to translate that into practical advice for students who are thinking about like what do I study, or like what do I do as a career. Like, you don't need to think about a specific job title because, like you said, Luki, to your point, it will probably not exist.
Sure.
And so the practical advice there is, like, in everything that you do, try to pick out the things that were the most interesting to you, because that will help you try to find your path a little bit more. For example, for me, my first job was I was a cashier at a grocery store, and I thought that I hated it. And for the most part, I did. Like, it was tough, like being on your feet for a whole shift and like having to just like scan groceries all the time. It was like hard work. But what I reflected on and realized much later, what I actually liked to do within that job was to help people. I really found it satisfying when people thanked me for helping them with their groceries. And so the advice for students is like, whatever you do, even if you hate your crappy part-time job, that's okay. But think about at least that one or two things that you like within that job. Do you love working with your coworkers in a team? Like, take that and figure out how you can apply that to what you might want to study or do as a career. So you don't have to think about a specific job title. Just pick out things from what you're currently doing that really light that fire inside of you.
Yeah, and one of the recommendations I often have for folks is to pick off what you said before about kind of journaling, and apply it to this context where I use what I call the 5-2-2-1 journaling method, where basically 5 minutes, 2 minutes journaling on things that drained you, those things that you'd rather not continue doing again, and then 2 minutes on what excited you, what energized you, what lit you up during the day, and then the last 1 minute thinking about, well, how can you minimize the first and maximize the second, and then ideally over the course of a week, a month, a year, then you start noticing patterns, right? And those patterns are ideally the future job or career path that you're going to look into and be able to develop into kind of a very fruitful and meaningful career. So definitely one where you can take the time to reflect, and it's one where there's all sorts of folks where they talk about like success in terms of like money and titles and stuff like that. Well, you want to figure out whether or not that applies for you. Right? And if that's something that you need to undertake, where you need the big fancy title and the corner office and what have you, or would you rather be doing something that lights you up on a day-to-day basis, right? So those are just some other considerations. So, well, thanks so much for talking a little bit about kind of the Odyssey, and we'll kind of I believe we gave some useful insights for folks that are going through that adulting phase and going through that odyssey in general. And hopefully folks will be able to reflect and apply to themselves, and as well have a little bit of forewarning for those that are yet to encounter this, that there will be some adversity that's coming, and you will need to learn to self-advocate as you kind of grow up and get into that adulting world as well. So are there any kind of words of wisdom that you'd want to leave folks with as we kind of conclude this mini-sode?
Yeah, thank you. I love that you tied together the three things. Like, you can't really start to master adulting unless you learn more about self-advocacy. And in order for you to, deal with adversity, part of that is also self-advocacy. In terms of words of wisdom for folks, you learn so much by talking to other people. You and I could have a whole episode on the value of networking. We could go on forever about that, but really talking to other people who are doing jobs that seem cool, and like asking them questions, or talking to a guidance counselor or an academic advisor in high school or university and saying, look, I'm really interested in this. Like, what can I do with that?
Mhm.
Talking to people through these thoughts that you have about adversity, or some questions that you have about how to set boundaries. Talking to people will always give you more insights than just keeping it all in your head.
For sure. And I think taking some time throughout the years and throughout your career to check in on yourself, because that decision that you made when you were 17, 18, right? And that subsequent decision that you made when you're 22 might not resonate when you're 25 or 35 and that sort of thing, because life changes and you change as well, and circumstances change. So if you can kind of just redirect yourself or kind of recalibrate yourself, I think that would be a useful thing. And changing is okay, right? Being able to do something different is not a bad thing as well, and probably makes for a very fruitful career and an interesting life. So thanks so much, Ellie, for joining us in the conversation, and hopefully we'll have you back for future episodes to talk about more things in careers and life.
Thank you, Luki.
Thanks for joining us on the SIWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, the podcast. If you like the podcast, please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you found this podcast. And if you can give us a review, that would be very appreciated. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn at LukiDanu, LukiDanu, and the same on most social media platforms. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks. Bye.